practical's over and they're done. It's not a good idea because of this. Test 4, what's the date I gave you guys? The 20th? The 19th? I wish I keep it the same.
Okay, you said test 4?
Yep. I don't know.
Test 3.
Oh, test 3, I'm sorry, I was counting practical. Yeah, my fault. Yeah. What did I say for test 3?
The 19th
19th.
November.
Test 3.
Presentations, the 16th and the 18th.
Okay. Final was the
Finals,
24th?
the 25th.
25th, close. On the lab 5, I don't have a date for that yet because that's coming. I don't know
Yeah, you
exactly when yet.
said 3 labs.
But that's coming up, all right, so that's, if you think about what's going on for the rest of the semester, that's the rest of your points, all right? So this one's worth 100, this one's worth 100, this one's worth 100, and then you got 40 points left for that. So if you're trying to figure out, I mean, you guys are doing well in this class, it's not a huge issue for you guys.
You still remember
Tanner's doing well too, so.
lab 3 that I showed you? Cause it still says it's missing.
I thought I updated
But I
that.
got a 0.
Okay, my fault, I thought I updated that. Write that down, because I don't want to forget it again.
Okay.
My fault. All right, but yeah, you three are doing well in this class, and so this isn't a huge thing for you, but if you're trying to figure out, you want to make sure you get your A, because all you three of you guys are in A range right now. That's where your points are going to come from. If we screw up and miss some stuff here, that can drop you down to a B. I don't think you guys are in danger of getting C's unless you fail everything, which you guys aren't those kind of students. The ones that I'm worried about are the ones that are not here, but that's on them.
That's
So, okay.
I said that's what I was gonna make sure.
So test 3 now, so we're moving back into more of a notes-based stuff now, so not practicals. Now we're going back to where we're actually gonna take tests and looking for questions. We're gonna be talking about something that we've already talked about. We're going back to this whole idea of force. It's gonna start on today, we'll cover a little more tomorrow. Then we're gonna talk about sprinting, and finally jumping, and that's what's gonna be the material that's gonna be found on the rest, oh, not on the rest, on your actual test. What's the special, not special, you guys don't probably wouldn't say special, what's important about your final?
It's cumulative.
It is cumulative. All right, well, we'll have a good review for that. That's gonna be on the 20th, I should put that up there too. Let me do this. All right, 11/20, technically the last day of class, that's that Friday. We'll review pretty well on that day. I'll give you everything you need to focus on for that final. We'll kind of break down, you guys know how to do that kind of stuff, and I'll pretty much give you the final. If you don't study for it, it's on you. But I'm gonna give you the questions that are gonna be happening on that. But it does go way back to the beginning of class. But just focus on test 3 though right now, we're gonna start talking about force. And force we already know a lot about. No crazy graphs or equations on this test, but it's gonna kind of go back to what we've already talked about and the way that force reacts within concentric and eccentric contraction. So I'm gonna erase spring and jumping for right now. I'm not doing that for a couple of minutes. Get that off. All right. So remember concentric and eccentric. It's been a little while. So let's refresh it real fast. And while you guys are writing that, I'll refresh it. You guys have these dates?
Yes.
Let me take a picture of that while you guys are writing. You gotta make sure you're into this stuff. Like, keep forgetting all these dates. I'm gonna answer those things in the Canvas. I would be having those dates kind of running, so you guys know what's upcoming. I'll do that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, sorry. I'll do that Monday. I love you guys, not that well. Going back though, concentric, let's refresh. What's a concentric contraction? Refresh. Muscle.
With gravity. Against gravity.
Against gravity. I still want to have that conversation, so that when you show this to Tanner, I still want to have the conversation about why pull-up is what you try to tell us everyone.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later on. But against gravity, what else is concentric? Muscle lengthening or muscle shortening?
Shortening.
Muscle shortening. Kind of a crazy concept, but basically think about anytime the muscle's getting bigger is when we're doing a concentric contraction. Even though it says shortening, it's actually getting bigger. So when I do that positive, if I do a constant contraction for my biceps, this is my constant contraction. When I get to the top, my bicep has swelled up and I look good for spring break, right? That's concentric. When I do my chest and I do my bench press and I push my way up, my chest is technically getting bigger on the way back up. That's the shortening aspect of it. So the other way we think about it, and this is what's going to be important for today as we start talking about this stuff, is the positive rep. So as we're doing that one, eccentric, obviously going to be opposite of those three. So with gravity, muscle lengthening, so bigger here. I used to say when I was trying to remember this stuff, not swole. Huh? So on the way back down, even though you might look good, getting ready for spring break, on the way back down though, that bicep now doesn't look as big on the way back down. That's the eccentric part of it, and that's a negative rep. And that's, again, what we're going to kind of get into today. So why that's important, we just went over all these muscles and joints with my eraser. All these muscles and joints and movements, and that's kind of why we're going to do all that stuff today. And we've already talked about this a little bit because we started mentioning, and Jalen had a really good point, but we're going to start talking more about today. The force will dictate what muscle causes that joint action. So we're going to start nice and simple because we've already talked about it with the knee. What motions occur at the knee? You guys just did this. Actually, neither one of you had one of the knee questions.
Flexion and extension.
Flexion and extension.
And hamstring is a biarticulate muscle.
Correct, it is. Did you tell Jalen you had probably the easiest test out of everybody?
I did. He did.
His
He
test
was
was-
asking me,
his
what
test
did
was
you
a
get?
joke.
And I was trying to remember, and I was like, wrist? And now I think I had to show you wrist flexion.
Yeah, it was really kind of a joke. That's okay. He was prepared. So flexion and extension is happening at the knee. Go.
Not swole.
Not swole.
Okay. I was making
Or not big. I meant
sure. I
that's
got you.
kind
I
of.
got
You guys
you.
kind of know what swole is, right? You heard that in the weight room before. So going back to just thinking now without having force being a thing for us, what muscle does flexion? So knee flexion is this way. What muscle does that?
Hamstring.
Hamstring.
So when it goes down, we just going over it.
Just going over them for now, don't do anything yet. You should kind of know this anyways. What muscle does the extension?
Hamstring. I mean, quad.
Quads, going back down.
Full quads.
So when we think about just without force dictating anything, if I'm just going against gravity, my hamstrings are kicking my foot up against gravity, that's muscle shortening this way. Now, I don't have any force that's going to involve, so in order to go back the other way, there's no force, I have to go against gravity going back that way, and my quads are straightening me out. So my hamstrings go this way, my quads go that way. What happens when I put weight on my back? Now there's a new force, right? And the main force that's going to be dependent upon that is which way. Let me write this. This is what we do need. You gotta know those muscles, though, right?
Yeah.
I think that's called dictates, right? Force dictates direction of contraction. Okay, so that is a new thing that we want to make sure we have in our brains and in our notes. The weight on my back for a squat is pushing me which way?
Down.
Straight down. So I'm standing here holding the weight on my back. The force is dictating that I have to hold it there. If I don't have force to hold it up, what's the weight going to do to me? It's going to crumple me up like an accordion.
Right.
So,
You gotta fight it off.
correct. So if I'm just standing here, so I'm in my squat rack, I put it on my back and I step out of the rack and now I'm holding the 315 on my back. What is holding that weight up?
I mean,
So I'm
a
holding-
combination of things.
Give me some combos.
Okay, like your spinal cord and the muscles that stabilize it.
Quads.
Right. Your trunk, your abdomen.
A lot of stuff, right? So now we think about that aspect of this. The force right there is dictated that in order for me not to crumple like an accordion, almost every muscle really in this area of my body and my legs has to be contracting isometrically so that I don't lose the weight and collapse.
So basically everything from your chest down got to be contracted.
Pretty much. And you might feel like, well, man, not so much your arms, excuse me, it's holding the bar a little bit, but really the weight from here, this part of my body straight down is what's really contracting in order to stand me up. my arms, my triceps and stuff, I'm doing a lot to maybe stabilizing the bar. But if you ever do that in DJR, next time you guys are squatting again, put a fairly heavy weight on that maybe you don't usually squat. Put that weight on and just get out of the rack. And see what you feel like when you're standing there just holding that weight and how much of this is all contracted. Because if it wasn't, like we said, what's going to happen to you? And we'll drop and go down, right? So isometric, which I didn't put over there, I didn't put up there. You guys remember what that one is? I need to write it.
Yeah.
You guys got these?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got these.
Isometric. So that is muscle. It's called static contraction. I don't know if we said it last time. Let's make sure we have it now. In other words, that's that way, but in other words, the saying that is, there we go. Is contraction with no joint movement. I'm holding that bar all in my back and I'm just standing there. I'm not going anywhere yet. I have not moved any joints, but all those muscles are still contracting in order to hold that bar up. If we remember our force velocity curve, this is max tension on the muscle, right? Remember that kind of, that line right in the middle? Remember, don't have to draw this now. When we had this thing here, and the kind of the line looked like that a little bit. We said that was max tension, or max force. That's occurring during an isometric contraction. That's when your muscle is just grabbing on and not letting go. So force dictates the direction of the contraction. Isometric holds the force. So this is, make sure, I'm gonna kind of go through these in a second. Let me write it down first. Isometric, which were you at?
That's, okay, so the isometric, that was the force velocity graph
Yeah.
where the
And remember this
dotted line met the force line.
Right, the force was there. Remember, you want to draw this with this next test. You probably have to draw it for your final, right? You guys probably know that's coming, right? But velocity was on the force was in here. We talked about that right in the middle there was the actual max force that we can hold on to whatever weight we're talking about at an isometric standpoint. So if I grabbed 90-pound dumbbells in DJR in both hands, I'm going to try to curl those. How am I going to do? Without cheating. Am I going to be able to curl 90s? I feel pretty good about myself, but I ain't that strong, right? Without cheating and doing some crazy stuff like this, that 90 is going nowhere.
Yeah.
But if I had two of you guys come over, grab the 90s, I'm going to go like this, and you're going to put the 90s in my hand and then move your hands out of the way. Could I hold that 90?
You can fight it off.
I could fight it off, and for a good little while there, I actually could hold that there, because in this position here, I've created max tension at my biceps and an
that's
isometric
negative
standpoint. And for as long as I possibly could, I'm going to be able to hold that 90 until that 90 gives up, and I actually will lower it back down.
That's when it tears the muscles.
Yeah, yes, you can think about that. Yeah, in a roundabout way, yes. From an injury standpoint, and also from an actual muscle building standpoint, that's a different class. You'll be in exercise phys. You're taking exercise phys in the spring?
I don't know yet.
Jalen is, right? X-Phys in the spring. You already taken X-Phys. No. You're taking X-Phys too.
I took what?
X-Phys? You haven't taken it yet.
Physiology? Oh,
Yeah.
I already took that.
Wait, with who?
Oh, with me.
I did.
Exercise physiology or physiological basic human movement? Different class.
What did I take with
Different class. That's the one you guys have already. You've already taken 23-21. All three of you had. Now you're taking 33-21, which is the next step to that class. We'll talk a lot more about that. That's what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
In that class, we'll talk a lot more about that whole tearing aspect of what's happening. But yeah, you're right. Okay. But isometric holds the force. I take 225 off the rack over DJR. That isometric contraction of my chest and other muscles in my triceps and shoulders is holding that up there, and that's what allows me to hold the force. Concentric contraction pushes the force. We can say pull, but muscles never actually, well, we should say pull, because muscles only pull. But either way, basically just think about pushes. So that constant contraction for the bench press, I'm at the bottom, and then I push the bar, I'm pushing the force away from me. That makes it concentric. And what does eccentric do? Ooh, that's not good.
Pulls it?
Not the best way to think about it, because I want to actually say controls the force. I can't spell it all today, it is Friday. When I'm doing my pull-up, and Tanner and I are going to argue about it on Monday, when I'm lowering myself back down, I'm controlling the force of gravity over my body weight on the way back down. I'm doing an eccentric contraction on the way back down of my pull-up. When I do my bench press, I'm holding 225. I control the 225 on the way down in order for me to push it on the way back up. If I don't control it, where's that bar going to do? It's going to come down fast and slam into my chest. Some people actually bench that way and try to bounce it off there. That's a different conversation. But if you control it on the way down in order to touch, you push it on the way back up, that's the eccentric nature. If I take the 315 on my back in the squat rack and I control it on the way down, I'm going to push it on the way back up. That's the eccentric nature. Now, the big key to this, and we're going to start talking more about next week, we're going to kind of introduce it right now. In exercise, and we'll start talking primarily about weight room stuff because that's the easiest way to see this, but we're talking about all exercise. So we get to sprinting and jumping, it'll actually apply to more non-weight stuff. But in exercise, the concentric muscle equals the eccentric muscle when talking about force. Okay, I'm going to put a star by that. That's a big thing for us to remember, for your test, but also for your life. We start talking about working with athletes, which all you guys want to basically be able to do. The concentric muscle equals the eccentric muscle when talking about force. I'm doing my squat. What is the eccentric muscle that allows me to push the force back up? My quads and my butt are the eccentric muscles that allows me to push. Same thing from that standpoint. If I just told you the quads are that, what's the eccentric muscle to lower the weight down? My quads and my butt. Kind of like we talked about the other day. No hamstrings involved in there. Even though we're doing knee flexion on the way down, the quads enable us to do the knee flexion, not our hamstrings, and that's what we're kind of getting into. We start talking about these individual exercises.
I got a question. It's off
Yep.
topic though, but our final, right? Is that going to be fill in the blank?
Yes.
Oh!
Yes.
No multiple choice.
No multiple choice. We're in the big leagues now, right? So we
Uh,
passed single A and double A. We've actually moved all the way up to, we've totally jumped over triple A. You guys are in the majors right now. But like I told these guys before you walked in, we're going to review on the 20th. I'm going to give you every question. It's on you to understand what you got to fill in for that. It's not going to be like the last one I said, you might have this or you might have that. I'm going to say, here's your 20 questions. This is it. And then you'll have, how many days you have to study for that? Tested on what day? 25th. On the 20th, I'm giving you the view. The 25th is the day. You got 5 days to get all that crap in your head for those 20 questions.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So no trickery on that one. I'm not saying this or that. You're getting the exact question. It's on you to get that stuff in your brain in 5 days.
Okay.
Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of information in this class, so I've tried to condense it down. There is 20 questions, which are all fill in the blanks, which I know kind of sucks. But I'm giving you the exact 20 questions.
It's exact 20. It is
Exact
a
20.
pool of questions, and you're
It's not like we've done in the other tests where I've said you might have this or you might have that. I'm giving you the 20.
Right.
If you don't know the 20, whose fault is it? Don't point at me. Point at yourself in the mirror. Yeah, there you go.
Basically, nobody subtracts.
All right, so keeping this in our brains,
That's what he said.
which is why if you're not here on the 20th, whose fault is it too? Look in the mirror, right? It's not my fault. And then, say if you three show up on the 20th and none of these other fools are here,
That's their fault.
it's going to be up to you to give them the questions. Now, I'm not going to say yes, you should. I mean, you look at your ethics and what you want to do. But me personally, I'd be having a hard time giving out the actual test when they didn't show up, but I did. But that's on you. That's also the teacher in me saying, don't do it, but whatever you guys want to do. But keeping that in mind now, go back to our knee, and we just talked about. So we talk about the knee, and we talk about doing a squat. We just had that example. You're gonna want to write these down. We start doing these examples, you're gonna write these down. This is what you'll see on test number 3. When doing a squat, what muscle is providing this concentric motion? The quad. So when doing a squat, concentric, I guess I abbreviated, equals the quads, right? We'll say butt too little, let's just keep it nice and simple, just say the quads. That's all I'm gonna worry about. With what you wrote down right over there, what muscle does the eccentric component?
Quad.
Is also the quad. During the concentric portion, what movement is happening at the knee? The concentric part. I've gone down, I'm going back up. What is my knee doing? Flexion or extension?
Flexion. Extension.
Extension on the way up. What's going on with the knee on the way down?
Flexion.
Flexion. Now that's where it gets tricky. As long as you remember this rule that's over here, it doesn't matter. Remember now, we just did the practical when we think about doing hamstrings because knee flexion is hamstring. Not when force is involved. Eccentrically, that knee is being flexed because of the quads. What about a lunge? Same idea. Just remember my right leg for now, I don't remember my left. If I lunge out and I go down, what muscle is lowering me down? Eccentric in nature. The quad in my right leg is lowering me down. What's happening at my knee though? Flexion or extension?
Flexion.
Flexion on the way down. And once I get down here with my lunge, I go back up. Extension is happening, but what's causing the extension? Quads again. Okay? Makes sense. Again, knees one of the easiest ones to do, so let me start with it. Hamstring curls, or these are also called leg curls in the weight room, is the opposite of that now. So think about leg curls. You guys done leg curls before? Over in DGR? I think they're called seated curls over there, right? Don't you sit up tall and do them? Then you go like that and kick yourself down. Same idea though. Hamstring curls, the weight is positioned on the back of your foot, whichever way, if you're sitting up or you're laying down, and you curl that weight underneath your butt. What is providing the concentric contraction? What muscle? As I push the weight against my heel this way, what has to provide this concentric contraction?
It's concentric, pulling again.
Pulling or pushing, however you want to think about moving the weight.
So the concentric is pulling or pushing.
Pulling or pushing or just moving the weight.
So
It's your hamstring.
It's your hamstring, exactly right. You can feel it right there while you're doing it, right?
Yeah, it's your
Depends
hamstring.
on the force now. So you-
Depends on the force, but yeah, whichever way you're pushing or pulling the force, if I was going to stand up, do a hamstring curl, so I have the weight on the heel right now, and I push against that weight stack, my hamstrings are pushing against the weight stack and doing the concentric nature, right? So from a concentric, that's how we're writing con, so the whole word. Concentric is hamstrings. Eccentric is what? Remember your rule.
Hamstring.
Don't ever overthink it. As long as you know the concentric muscle, you should know the eccentric muscle. But again,
Are they always the same?
what's that?
Are they always?
They
the
are
same?
always the same, as long as force is involved.
As long as force is.
As long as force is involved. When I take away force, it gets a little bit different, but as long as force is involved, and as long as force is accelerating, that's what we're talking about with jumping. But yes, it's always going to be the same. What's the concentric motion that's occurring at the knee when I'm doing the knee curl? What's my knee doing?
Flexion.
Flexion. And then extension. I'll kind of just make it a little bit
So
easier.
that's the only thing that's gonna change is the movement. Like flexion and extension, that's the only thing that's gonna change.
Exactly right. As long as in your brain, that's why we did the practicals first. If you can start connecting what muscle is causing that movement, now again, for your test, you'll understand here and say, that's the hamstring knee flexion, but you still gotta think it, and your brain's gotta have it in your brains a little bit. If you know that, you know what's going on, because as long as you've got the concentric part of this motion down. Okay, we'll keep that one there, we're gonna do one more. Everybody's got this rule, very important rule. You guys know I love to give you rules. I don't have a fancy name for it, it's just a rule. But what's the buddy of the knee? What's the other joint that's his buddy?
Elbow.
Elbow. So that's what we're gonna do his buddy right now. Since these two are nice and easy. What happens at the elbow? Elbow flexion, elbow extension. Bicep curl we'll start with, we're gonna flip it around. Can't put bicep, that kind of gives you the answer. Arm curl. If I grab my DJR weights, I do an arm curl. All right, what's the concentric muscle that's performing that?
Bicep.
Bicep. Concentric equals bicep. You know your rule, so eccentric equals what? Biceps. What's happening during the concentric contraction if I do a curl at the elbow? Flexion or extension?
Flexion.
Flexion on the way up, so obviously extension on the way down.
Okay, I see how this would have got, if we would have did this before the practice. this would've-
Yeah, you guys would have lost your mind, and you probably would have done something to my car, because you guys all know what I'm driving now, so it's kind of scary. So that's why I had to flip around, make sure we did it the right
I
way.
ain't catching no charge.
Arm curls is that one,
There
so
you go. Yeah, that one.
the only way to kind of say this one is to actually put the muscle in it, so it kind of gives it away. But tricep extensions. I'll say arm extension, make you think. Well, I just kind of said what the muscle is, but you guys will still think. Arm extensions, not arm curls, arm extensions. Concentric, eccentric muscle. So I have that dumbbell behind my head. Let's just do the cable one because it's easier for me to stand here and do this one. I'm holding the cable over DJR and I push my arm down and I extend down. What muscle is doing the concentric part of that motion? Which one? Tricep. So you know your rule, that means triceps is also doing the eccentric part. What's happening during the concentric at the elbow? What motion?
Extension.
Extension on the way down. It's actually in the thing there, but that's okay. And then flexion would be on the way back up. Think about your cables now while your eyes are writing that down though. So if I'm pushing this down, what's going in? So this is concentric, right? We've already talked about concentric is against gravity, right? That bar I'm holding though is going with gravity, right? What's going against gravity?
Force. No.
You're right, the force, but where's the force? And those cable machines, now the cable's connected to that bar, I'm pushing down, the cable goes up here, right around, what's it connected to over here? That's raising up.
The weights.
The weight. That's the force in that kind of cable situation. As I push down, even though the bar is going with gravity, that whole weight stack is going against it, that's what you're lifting up. Keep that in your brain when you guys are looking at the cable stuff over there.
Okay, so like stuff like with the ropes or the big bar, when you're pushing down on it and the weight coming up, okay.
Always remember where the weights, if you're doing the machines, always remember the weight stack is going, because that's going to be a good indication of what, if you're doing a concentric or eccentric in the machine standpoint. I'm doing that pull down machine over in DJR, right? I work on my lats and I go down this way. The bar itself is going with gravity, but that weight stack is going against gravity, it goes up. That's what you're lifting. That gives you the actual concentric nature. As I come down, weight stack's going up, I'm doing concentric contraction. Make sense? When I go back up, the bar itself is going against gravity, but it doesn't matter because the whole weight stack is pulling the bar, not the actual gravity itself. Okay. Just keep that, I'm not going to test you on that, but I just want you to have that in your thought process when you guys are working on cables and stuff inside the DJR area. All right, so knee and elbow, nice and simple, right?
Which one's positive, negative again? Because positive demonstrates your strength.
That's another way to think about it.
Negative motion is letting it out, controlling it out.
So if you're just doing, what motion, or what exercise were you demonstrating right
Say
there?
I'm doing pull downs.
Okay,
All right. This is positive motion.
correct.
Positive is
I don't want to say it.
concentric.
Concentric.
Say it with your chest.
Concentric.
Yes, concentric, yeah. Positive motion is concentric,
That's positive.
Right.
It's showing my strength.
showing your strength.
Right. When I have to let my strength back out, control the weight, it's eccentric.
Right, I've never actually heard it that way. That's a good way to think about that. That helps you guys at all?
High intensity.
Anytime you're trying to show your strength off, that's when you're doing the eccentric part of it. So that's what Tanner and I will fight. When you're doing your pull-up, when are you showing your strength? Going all the way up. It's got to be concentric in nature.
So bench press, your eccentric is when you push up.
No,
Because that's when you're showing your strength, right?
concentric is showing your strength.
Oh, concentric, so eccentric.
Eccentric is when you lower it back down.
Okay.
When I'm doing my squat, when is the concentric part of it? Concentric,
Going
doing the
down.
squat.
Going down.
Going up.
Going up, that's when you show your strength. On the way down is when you're controlling the weight, that's eccentric. That's why we're doing it.
You just said it.
On the way back up, as long as you got one of them, you know the other way. But whenever you're controlling the weight, on the way down, controlling is eccentric. When you're pushing against the weight is the concentric part.
Okay, I got you.
So think about it, we'll keep doing examples next week, but just for
So
thought process.
elbow extension. This is concentric. I'm showing my tricep strength.
correct.
Coming back, I'm controlling the weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's eccentric.
Right, and with my arms, when I used to think about this stuff, arms and shoulders, we start talking about shoulders too. We ever do exercise in DJR, you guys want to look cool and like roll your sleeves up, look really big. But every time your muscle actually shows its definition, you're doing the concentric part of it. I'm here and I'm looking, my triceps are all like big and swolled up, that's concentric. When I kind of lose the definition, that's eccentric. When I'm doing my curls and I'm coming up this way, they're getting big and they're looking good, that's the concentric part. When I come back down is the eccentric part.
Okay.
Same thing we're doing our shoulders, and we'll do shoulders next week, but you guys ever do lateral raises, right? It goes out this way. When you raise up this way, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror with those dumbbells, your shoulders start kind of popping off, your delts start showing it really good. That's the concentric part. On the way back down, they tend to lose their definition a little bit, they just don't look as big anymore. That's the eccentric part. Harder to see, but you can also see when you're doing squats, if you have yourself in front of a mirror and you lower yourself down, the leg just doesn't look necessarily big, but on the way back up, what happens to that quad? it gets big and it's nice and swelled up, and that's when you're doing the concentric part. Showing your force, I used to think about showing the muscle, that's what I used to think about. But however you want to try to remember it, this is what we're going to be talking about for the next kind of week,
That's
until
why
next
I
Friday.
say, pay attention to where the force is instead of the actual movement, because the movement's gonna trick you, but if you know where the force is going.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why, like you said, and like you guys all think now, that's why we do the practical first. Now I'm throwing all this other crazy stuff at you, but as long as you know one, you definitely know the other one. You're there as long as you know it, but we also gotta make sure you remember these movements, because it's gonna come back to you now. If you didn't do well in your practical, now's the time to kind of get back in and see that stuff again. I'll keep demonstrating them, we gotta still know what those motions are in order to kind of connect the dots here. But you get one, you got the other one when you start talking about force. What is it when I'm jumping? Which we'll talk about jumping in a couple of weeks, but
Stuff going on.
so if I'm gonna do a vertical jump, you guys ever seen the thing up there, they go up there and they slap it, like you watch the
Yeah.
NFL combine, right? Sometimes they do a one-step foot in, but most of the times it's just a straight down move. So the thing's up there. When I lower myself down, am I doing eccentric or concentric?
Essentially.
Eccentric.
Concentric.
And then what I do on the way back up? Concentric all the way on the way back
Showing
up.
your force.
What is my shoulders doing on the way down?
Relaxing, so they are concentric,
Other way.
I mean eccentric,
Eccentric,
so they're opposites.
right? And then when I go to explode back up, what do my shoulders gotta do in order to get up there and reach at it? That's all eccentric in nature. They are connected there. Eccentric down, concentric up. When we start talking about jumping, it gets back to the whole eccentric, concentric transition. Remember that? We'll start talking about it again. Gotta load up the spring to release the spring. That's what we're gonna start thinking about when we start talking about running and jumping when we get into it. We're gonna get to these first. Got the two easy ones. It's a little more complex next week. But it's in your brains a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I
it's
see
pretty
the
complicated
difference.
once you kind of get it.
Once you kind of get it, and that's the big thing about it, like,
Because if you notice, it's the same thing.
exactly right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like,
So,
if
If you know one, you should know the other
If
one.
you know one, you should know the other one. Just remember where the motions are occurring, though, because that's still
Yeah,
going to come back and get you a little bit. Because remember how many motions are occurring at the shoulder? A whole bunch, right? We had all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Now, I will say when we do the shoulder, I'm not going to do too much international rotation. You don't see a lot, like you don't go to DJRs like going like this, right? I've never seen it. I've seen you guys doing that. We really have a problem. We're not really doing this stuff. Maybe in injury rehab stuff you might see that, but we won't cover that. But what we cover in, for rehab stuff and pictures and stuff. But we will cover bench press, shoulder abduction, adduction. We will look at like lateral raises. We will look at adduction. The motions that are occurring naturally in the weight room, we'll look at. Well, we know I can do horizontal this stuff, right? We don't see that too often in the weight room. We won't talk too much about that. But we will talk about doing those things, right? So we're getting those. So some of the motions will go away, but there's still gonna be a lot more for the shoulder, the hip, the neck, and the trunk. I mean, those are a little bit easier, but yes, all the stuff's gonna come back to you. When I'm doing a Russian twist, that's what's gonna get a little bit complicated. But when I'm doing a Russian twist, what motion is this? Trunk what?
Transverse.
It's transverse, but trunk.
Rotation.
Trunk rotation. Okay, what muscle's doing this?
Oblique.
Oblique. So if I'm doing a Russian twist, imagine I'm sitting on my butt and I'm going this way and I'm holding that 25. What's the concentric motion? It's a little tricky.
Concentric show, I keep getting.
So are we going this way or are we going this way?
When you're going,
When you pull it, you're showing your strength.
when you're twisting, no, when you come
Oh,
back
you
around,
take it
so
away.
Coming back up.
you
So,
come back up, so you show your strength.
right, if I go to my left and I bring it down this way, that's eccentric in nature. I'm loading up the spring again. And then concentrically, the obliques on this side of my body are bringing me back to the front.
Concentric
Come over
shows
this way, the obliques on this side of my body are bringing me back. So every time I come back to the middle, I'm doing the concentric part.
And then you're back, and you try to come back.
Right, yeah. Right, so we got it a little bit. All right, we'll pick it up again on Monday. We'll start talking about the ankle and we'll talk about the wrist on Monday.
What about the project?
Oh yeah, so let's do that real fast, because Commissioner did have some questions on that. But how much time we got? Where we at? I haven't killed you, have I? I know it's a Friday.
It's 114.
Plenty of time. When we say presentation, it is project, but when we say presentation, you're actually presenting it. All right, and that's on the 16th and the 18th, right? That was our date? I think that's what we said, David? Okay, so there's technically 8 of you in here. I thought to see with Tanner what's going on with him. But we'll split it up. I'll probably do 3 on this day and 4 on that day, or 4 and 4, however we're gonna break it up. But we're gonna come in. What do you have to present? You gotta come up with product or a workout either one. I've had both in the past, and both of them do the same thing, but a product or a workout to demonstrate any of the following. We can do force velocity. We can do length tension. Squeaky performance window. And then the training zones. In other words, what are those for? What did you guys just do on test number 2? All the graphs.
Yeah.
So in other words, another way for me to saying this is all the graphs you guys learned. But those 4 graphs, you gotta come up with a product or some kind of a workout to demonstrate what's happening inside of these graphs. And that's what you're gonna be presenting to us as a class. Okay? 4 to 5 minutes is required. Lesson 4, lesson